Pasito tum tum, pasito tum tum, pasito tum tum, pasito tum tum.
Hello, we're in yellow in the fall. Who cares? This is your Willie. Welcome to a classic modern reviews. If I could sum up the modern Beauty and the Beast remake in 5 seconds, it would go somewhere like this.
There goes the baker with his tray like full waves.
That's why you use auto-tune and I don't.
I just love those 5-second videos.
It is often traditional to compare a new remake to its last predecessor, but in the case of Beauty and the Beast, I'm not gonna do that, for the most part. Instead, I'll be comparing it to another international modern remake that some might not be familiar with. The 2014 French version of La Belle et la Bête. Now what these two remakes have in common is, neither one is better than the originals. The new Disney remake is not better than the classic animated version, and the new French version is not better than the 1946 classic. By no means are these movies terrible, but they fall either being too repetitive or too dull.
Now, since the supporting cast and the villains are polar opposite, I'm just gonna leave them out. And no, this is not gonna be a which is the prettiest Belle, because let's face it, if these two went ahead with each other, it would end up in a tie! So tuck yourself in the bed, open up that fairy tale cover, and let's look at the origins of this story.
Beauty and the Beast goes way back since ancient Greek myths that had a woman interact with an abnormal man. It wasn't until 1946 that French surreal director Jean Cocteau debuted La Belle et la Bête on the big screen, based from a 1740 book that was influenced by the rare condition of Spaniard Petrus Gonsalvus in the 16th century. It's the story of a young prince that is cursed to live as an animal for the rest of his life, unless there is a woman that falls in love with him. By the time this came out, World War II was over, the Nazis had surrendered, and France was once again free from its tyranny. In other medias, this would have worked as an escapism of its dark recent period. Instead, it translated as a reflection of their present time, as it is often considered not just a movie or a film, but also poetry. This story resonated with people for its gothic look, its surreal atmosphere, the cinematic artistry with its shadows and characters, and a very emotional theme about beauty lying within. Walt Disney tried to work on the story when he was alive, but was later dropped because of how hard it was to adapt it in that time. Moving years later into 1991, we get into the first animated picture being nominated in the Academy, Beauty and the Beast. This was the time when Disney was hitting success after success in their golden age with Little Mermaid, Aladdin, and of course The Lion King. People fell in love with it, not just for its animation and its Broadway style of music, which it also helped, but it presented a fresh take on how Disney used to tell their stories. These were characters that could exist in a real world and wouldn't just meet and fall in love instantly, they would work on building a courtship that blossomed into a love story. We don't see any evil sorcerers, we see town heroes becoming villains on getting what they wanted by any means. It's been said a few times how the Disney version is more about making the Beast change from a heartless brat to a kinder being, while the French version is about making Belle change from resisting the Beast to accepting him. But it's also interesting how the Disney remake is more focused to know Belle's backstory, while the French version is more focused to know the Beast's backstory.
So even though these actresses might look as Belle, which of them stands out the most as the true modern Belle?
Now, when I first heard that Emma Watson was gonna be the next Belle, I thought it was a perfect idea on paper. Because in the animated version, she was beautiful, she's a bookworm, and also independent. Emma Watson is beautiful, she's a bookworm, and also independent. So it made sense to cast her since she embodies all of these qualities. Unfortunately, I could barely notice them. Not to say that she was not smart or independent, but it is hard to notice when she has to top off the animated performance that was so good. I wasn't looking at a strong feminist representation, I was looking at someone reading the lines from someone else. In the French version, I could however notice a little more of her strong spirit. Maybe not as independent, I mean she lived with her brothers and was taken care of by her father, but she could take action of her own. She could walk into danger, be terrified, and still go through with it. On top of that, she could also be defiant and brutally answer back.
Vous croyez être un homme, mais vous n'êtes qu'une bête cruelle et solitaire. Vous pourrez tout essayer, me soudoyer, m'envoûter, vous ne cesserez de me répugner.
Okay, that's French balls. But I'll get back into that scene later. And on top of that, she didn't have to sing, which for Emma Watson, no hard feelings, but it's very obvious she's not a singer.
There's something sweet and almost kind, but he was mean and he was coarse and unrefined. Something sweet and almost kind, but he was mean and he was coarse and unrefined.
In fact, most of the singing voices are not as good. But to be fair, I don't want to give the full blame on her. Most of her performance involved working with CGI, and that can be very difficult. Not to say the French remake also had plenty of CGI, but unlike Emma who had to interact with things that were not there, she only had to wonder and react to them. And for the most part, she does a much better job. So I prefer Léa Seydoux as the modern Belle because I just find her to be a better actress. Just compare their reactions to how they first meet the Beast. Which one you think looks convincingly afraid? Then look at Emma Watson. Did she just hiccup?
Does she always hiccup when she gets scared? Sorry.
So I go with Léa Seydoux as the more Belle out of these modern Belles.
That brings me to the most interesting character of this story.
If there's one character that people look forward to seeing the most, it's the Beast. He's the victim of the story you grow to like because of his vulnerable, sensitive side. He looks like an animal, but acts more like a gentleman. You can almost resemble him to the Frankenstein monster, who looks evil, but all he wants is just a friend. And the Beast only wants to be loved, and so he does. Audiences fell in love with him from the moment he first debuted in 1946, that it took a backlash when he transformed into the Prince Charming. People hated the ending, including children. Even Belle is turned off by his transformation in the end. Most notable quote is from Greta Garbo when she shouted out on the big screen, "Give me my beast back!" Hell, I could almost hear Mel Gibson shouting from the back, "Give me back my beast!" But it was a great reaction to how audiences preferred the kinder, loving Beast side, as well as the animated version would charm people with his redemption. So, how do they translate in the new remakes? Well, one is a dick, the other one looks like something out of Shrek. Now the remakes do expand a little more backstory to each Beast. The Disney version teases how bad he was when he was a human and how he lived under the abuse of his father. The French version only spends on his last few days before he's transformed. But if there's one thing the new remake does better, is they have a better reason why he's cursed. In the classic, he's cursed because his parents didn't believe in magic? Huh, talk about a fanatic enchantress.
The power of Merlin compels you!
In the remake, he kills the daughter of a god, and so he gets even with him. But does that excuse the fact that he's not as charming or likable or emotionally investing? No. While the classic French Beast acted like a humble servant, always asking but not enforcing, this one does enforce and replies rudely when unnecessary.
Une enfant ardente.
J'aime que les gens croient que je suis puérile et futile. Comme ça, ils se
trop!
I don't know if it takes influence from the Disney adaptation, but not only does he miserably fail on making a connection, but he fails on making us fall in love with him. The Beast in the Disney version is okay. Sometimes his manners resemble to a child, which is cute.
But, truth be told, they're both a pale comparison to the originals.
I don't think either one is a strong interpretation of the Beast. but at least I felt more of a connection with the Disney version. Out of these two, he was the most likable and the most charming, so I go with the Disney version with the better beast. Just don't ever make him sing again.
Now I know she'll never leave me, even as she runs.
That had potential! And potentially speaking, that leads me into what is it that bugged me about these remakes.
Whether what version you prefer is up to which one you grew up with, the animated version or the more faithful to the book. The Disney version is more upbeat and colorful with their music. The French version is more stylistic with their cinematography, their wardrobe, their costume design. It looks and feels like a fairy tale world, and it has a sense of exploration to this magical world, unlike the Disney version that shows lack of interest to explore the surrealism of its own world. But that's not my issue with the film. My issue is with Disney now remaking everything. This one felt the least unique out of all of them. It's not as badly of a shot-by-shot copy as Psycho, but whenever they repeat scenes from the original, they don't actually fit. When the animated version came out, Roger Ebert said in his review that the energy level that's possible in animation is so much higher than you can possibly get human actors to move around, that it almost makes animation seem like the ideal medium for the film musical. There are things you can get away with animation. You can exaggerate facial expressions. You can make things that don't make sense fit in. When you're doing it in live action, it only limits those chances that it becomes more noticeable. Like asking a horse, where's her father at? And when they add new scenes, they don't serve much purpose. You can take away the magical book and you won't miss anything. But for me, the big one was the revelation of what happened to Belle's mother.
Okay, I have heard people say that this makes Belle more complex. Here's why I think this revelation does not work on the story surrounding it.
When it comes to a good revelation involving two parties, there must be a change of attitude towards one another or change completely our perspective of the story. Take the Harry Potter series for example, involving Harry and Severus Snape. Before the revelation, they weren't so much fond of each other, and as the story progressed, one started to show hate and lack of respect for the other.
Fight back! You coward, fight back!
But after the revelation, there's a change of attitude towards the other party, from profound hate to admiration and respect.
And he was the bravest man I've ever known.
Another example would be the famous revelation in Star Wars involving Luke and Vader. One party despises the other and wants to kill him for all the wrongdoings he's done. But after the revelation, change of attitude occurs instantly. Now, he wants to save him from all the wrongdoings he's done.
You can't do this. I feel the conflict within you. Let go of your hate.
It is too late for me.
Now let's look into the big revelation in Beauty and the Beast, involving Belle and her father. Before the revelation, they loved and treated each other with kindness, but after the big revelation, they still love and treat each other with kindness. So, what does it add into it?
Nothing!
It doesn't make their relationship better, or worse, or take the story to another direction. There are no changes or surprises other than her mother died, which anyone could have guessed. It's just there only to fill in the 2-hour length since the original was less than an hour and a half. Now if her mother would have abandoned her instead because she couldn't afford to take care of her and was given to Maurice, her non-father, as an orphan, that would have made an interesting conflict between them when the truth was later revealed. How even though he wasn't her father, he still took care of her as her own daughter. And it would have made her relationship with the Beast much deeper since they both would have shared parental mistreatment. But since it doesn't affect her relationship with anyone, there is no point to it. Now that doesn't mean the French version is free from having problems, because it's kind of a big one. The romance, as well as the film, is very dull. I'll give it props that it tried something new with them having a strange connection through dreams, with her knowing more about the Beast's backstory. But during their minimal time we see them together, they argue, they gel, they try to kill each other. It's not like in the Disney version where they don't get along and then start falling in love. They don't show any chemistry that builds up from a friendship to a romance. In the classic, they start off very awkwardly, but they work through it by making Belle feel at home, while she notices the softness of the beast, therefore repaying him with kindness once in a while. Those moments together would be enough to make me believe that she would actually return for him. In the new version, he forces himself to her, while she resists him.
Résiste-moi tant que tu veux. Tu seras à moi.
I mentioned before how this scene establishes her as a strong and independent character, but it also weakens the plot.
Me soudoyer, m'envoûter, vous ne cesserez de me répugner!
Because what follows is Belle trying to escape from the beast, who goes after her. Later, after being saved from drowning, she's then allowed to visit her family, only with the condition that if she doesn't come back, the beast will die. But wait, where did this come from? After all the time they spent fighting and insulting one another?
M'envoûter, vous ne cesserez de me répugner!
Am I supposed to believe that she would actually return for him? Or that he would die out of heartbrokenness because she left him? Maybe they tried to play more to the Stockholm Syndrome? But because they don't develop the romance that well, it only ends up being forced. Say what you want about the Disney version, at least there is some sort of chemistry there. But it also shows how people internationally think so differently. In France, this was well received with positive reviews, while internationally, it got more negative feedback than good. It just shows how everyone has a different taste of what they like. Where some ideas might be considered as bad in someplace else, it can be welcome and conceived as something good somewhere else.
But in this case, what is worse? Is it worse to try something new and not get the spirit from the story? Or is it worse to copy it from something else and still get the spirit of the story?
Truth be told, I had more of a connection with the Disney version since I grew up with it. Technically, it is more entertaining and faster paced to keep your interest. So even though I felt more familiar with this version, I'm gonna say the French version is the better of these remakes. Because even though it fails at convincing me that they're in love, they at least try something new with their source material. It doesn't live under the shadows of the original, which, truth be told, you can put these classic Disney songs anywhere else, it's gonna get a positive feedback for how good they were back then. And it knows that these two are the most important players of the story and stays focused with them. Unlike the Disney version, the supporting cast take over! They are the most charming, they are the most interesting, and I end up caring more about them than the two protagonists. You know there is something wrong when the camera spends more time with the staff members dead than with the main lead. It doesn't even end with the two lovers as the central focus. It ends with one shot of the supporting cast singers, almost symbolizing that, yeah, we stole the show, we were the stars of this movie. Sometimes the French version paid off with their visuals, and other times it doesn't with its bland supporting cast, generic villain, and forced romance. What do you think if you've seen both of these remakes? Leave your thoughts on the comment section to see which modern tale you think it's as old as time.
And those were my thoughts on Beauty and the Beast. If you liked this video, leave a like and subscribe for more content. Well guys, tune in next time because when I get back, I'll be comparing The Spirit of the Beehive and Pan's Labyrinth. So for now, that's it for today. Ciao!